You are a useless old woman.
Useless old woman. That's what my own son called me, right there at Sunday dinner, in front of everyone. His wife, my grandchildren, all of them. He didn't lower his voice, didn't hesitate, just said it like he was commenting on the weather. And me? I just smiled, looked right at him, finished chewing my piece of chicken real slow, and didn't say a word. In that moment, it wasn't worth it. But the next morning, with the sun barely crawling through the living room windows, I got up, grabbed my keys, called a locksmith, and changed every single lock in the house. Front door, back door, even the garage gate. No warning, no yelling, no drama. In that silence, I knew I wasn't the one on the outside of this family anymore. They were. What happened after that? It changed everything. Have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own home? My name is Ruth Ann Morrison. I'm 76 years old, and I've lived every one of them, thank God. Born in a small town in rural Tennessee, back when life was simple and hard work meant something. I spent 40 years as a seamstress, stitching wedding dresses, quilts, and memories for this community. My hands built this house, stitch by stitch, dollar by dollar. I raised 2 children, Michael and Sarah. But it was Michael I always expected more from. He was the man of the house after his father passed. What he didn't know was that I had something he wanted, something he thought was already his. And when he found out the truth, well, that's when everything unraveled. Let me take you back to that Sunday. Everything seemed normal. Michael came over with his wife Jennifer and the boys. The table was full, laughter here, conversation there. Sarah couldn't make it. She lives 2 states away. But the house was loud, just how I always liked it. I've always made a point of keeping up Sunday dinners. It's tradition, and it was right in the middle of that conversation, between one sip of sweet tea and another, that Michael let it fly. "Ah, Mom, you don't really understand this stuff anymore, do you? Things aren't like they used to be. You're getting old, kind of useless for these things." He said it with a laugh. But anyone who knows me knows. Some laughs cut deeper than any knife. Jennifer glanced at him sideways, like she was warning him. Why would you say that? But he didn't care. The grandkids kept eating, didn't even notice. I looked at him, and listen, I'm not one to make a scene, never have been. I took a breath, chewed my rice, adjusted my chair, wiped my mouth with the napkin, and said real simple, "Maybe you're right, Michael." That was it. Nothing more. I didn't argue, didn't slam my hand on the table, didn't raise my voice, but inside me, something broke for good. And I realized right then and there that I might be called a useless old woman, but the one who was failing to value who I was, who I had been. That wasn't me. It was him. It was my family. I finished eating, helped clear the plates, and in the afternoon I went to my rocking chair out on the porch. You know that wooden rocking chair you make yourself? I built mine years ago when I still had strength in my arms. I sat there until the sun disappeared behind the hills, thinking. Because an old woman's mind never stops, does it? We might seem like we forget things, but deep down, words keep echoing. Useless old woman. I remembered when Michael was little, and I had to carry him because he'd fall and scrape his knee. I was the one who taught him how to hammer a nail when he didn't have the strength to hold the hammer right. And now? Now this is what I heard. That night, I didn't sleep right. I got up, went to the kitchen, made myself a strong black coffee, even though it was the middle of the night. I stood there staring at the keys hanging on the wall, and something clicked. I thought, why am I letting things stay this way? Why do I keep cooking Sunday dinners, leaving the door unlocked, welcoming everyone like it's my obligation? The truth was, the house was mine. The deed, the gate, even the land my father left me. Everything in my name. And Michael, always coming and going, sometimes without even saying good morning. The next day, With the first rooster crow, I was already up. Took a shower, put on my nicest outfit. That blue blouse Maristella always said looked good on me. Wait, no, not Maristella. That was my husband's name for me. His name was Robert Morrison. He's been gone 8 years now, God rest his soul. He used to call me his steady hand because I never wavered, not even when times got hard. I grabbed my keys and left, went to the locksmith down the street. The young man already knew me. Miss Ruth, always punctual, always polite. I didn't beat around the bush. I want to change all the locks in my house, son. Today. He looked a little surprised, asked if everything was okay. I said it was. It was just time to do what needed doing. Before noon, all the doors had new locks, and I was at peace. Not out of revenge, it wasn't that. It was just to put things in their place. To remind them that even old, even with white hair, I still had my worth. That here, I was the one in charge. I spent the afternoon sitting on that same porch, but this time holding the new set of keys in my hand. And there, in that rocking chair, looking at the sun again, but with a different mindset, I thought, let's see who comes knocking now. And listen, that same evening I heard footsteps on the sidewalk. I didn't need to get up. I just sat there rocking slowly, listening, waiting. Because those who know how to listen also know the right time to speak. You know what's funny? When you stand up for yourself after years of bending, people don't know how to handle it. They expect you to just keep taking it. But not me, not anymore. At first, nobody noticed. Not in the family group chat, not on the phone calls that never came anyway. 2-3 days passed after that cursed Sunday dinner, and the silence was absolute. I kept my routine the same way. Got up early, tended the plants in the front garden, swept the yard, cleaned the porch. The only difference was that now I locked everything. Every time I went inside, I turned that key slowly, like I was sealing off territory that had been too vulnerable for too long. And deep down, even without anyone asking me anything, I knew that sooner or later someone would show up. Because people who get used to having access to your life without asking permission eventually notice when the gate's locked. It was Thursday, almost noon, when I heard a noise at the gate, a quick, impatient bang. I got up slowly, went to the side window of the living room, and peeked out. It was him, Michael, my son. Baseball cap, dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and the face of someone who didn't understand what was happening. He was ringing the doorbell with his finger glued to it, like he was at some government office and not his own father's. Wait, his own mother's house. I didn't open it, just watched from inside, silent. I saw him pull his cell phone from his pocket and make a call. The kitchen phone rang, that old landline I still kept out of stubbornness. I let it ring. The doorbell kept going. He tried again, then 3 hard knocks on the gate. Then came the loud voice trying to sound calm. "Mom, you there? Everything okay? Why'd you change the locks?" I sat down in the living room chair, the same one where I read the paper every morning, and stayed there. Not out of pride, but because I wanted to see how far he'd go. See if that panic in his voice was real, or if it was just the inconvenience of losing the comfort of coming and going without asking. Michael always had that. He thought the house was his too. And in a way, I let him think that for too long. Because when you love too much, you end up confusing love with permission. And I gave permission for everything. To interrupt me, to correct me in public, to call me outdated, and finally, useless. He left that day without an answer, and that night, a message came through. "Mom, if there's a problem, talk to me, but changing the locks isn't the way." I read it, took a deep breath, deleted the message without responding. Because sometimes silence teaches more than any sermon. On Saturday, it was my daughter-in-law's turn. Jennifer showed up at the front of the house with the boys. One of them was holding a soccer ball, the other had a little plastic bag in his hand. Probably had cake or some leftovers from lunch. She clapped her hands and shouted, "Miss Ruth, you okay?" When she saw nobody was coming, She called louder. "Can we come in?" I looked through the crack in the curtain, and it hurt to see my grandkids there, not understanding anything. But it was necessary, because if I opened the door just because of them, everything would go back to normal. And I didn't want normal anymore. I wanted respect. And it wasn't easy, no, because a grandmother's heart isn't made of stone. I saw the youngest one, little Tommy, sit down on the sidewalk and start crying softly, and that tore me apart inside. But at the same time, I thought, they need to learn too. Even the children need to understand that Grandma isn't just the clown at the party, the weekend cook. I'm a person, I feel. It was that Saturday night that something different touched me. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out one of those old boxes from the closet. Inside were old things, photos, letters from Robert, little notes from Michael when he was a boy. I found one in particular, a folded piece of paper with a crooked drawing of a gate and the phrase, "Mama, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." I read it like I was hearing his child's voice. It hurt, it broke me, but it also gave me strength, because it was true. Once, Michael admired me. Once, he was proud of me. So what happened? When did I become just a useless old woman? I stayed there for a while with the paper in my hand, wondering if I'd failed as a mother. If maybe I'd been too hard or too soft. If I'd failed to correct when I should have, or insisted where I didn't need to. Because we get old and start revisiting everything, every choice, every silence, every yes that should have been a no. But by the end of the night, I closed the box and said out loud to myself, "Ruth, you don't deserve disrespect, and anyone who truly loved you never treated you with contempt." On Sunday, I decided to go to the neighborhood church. It had been a while. I walked in quietly, sat in the last pew, and listened to the whole sermon with my heart a little tight. The pastor was talking about dignity, about parents who feel ashamed to exist in their own homes. And he said something I'll never forget. There's no dishonor in growing old. The dishonor is in forgetting who taught you to walk. That went right through me. I went home feeling like I'd done the right thing. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I just needed to make it clear that as long as I was alive, I wasn't going to accept being treated like leftovers. And that same night, I heard a car pull up in front of the house. I went to the porch, light off. It was Michael again. But this time, he wasn't alone. And that would change everything. I recognized the car by the headlights before I even saw who it was. It wasn't just Michael this time. When he opened the door and got out, I could tell by the silhouette in the dark that his wife was with him. And there was an older man in a suit holding a briefcase under his arm. It looked like something out of a movie, but it was just another chapter of my story. They stood there on the sidewalk, talking quietly among themselves, looking at the house like they were weighing whether or not it was worth knocking again. Michael took a few steps forward, put his hand in his pants pocket, and took a deep breath before calling out, "Mom, this is important. You need to open up, please." This time, the voice didn't come full of confidence or arrogance. It was different. There was something there that made me get up from the chair and walk to the door. But I still didn't unlock it. I stayed behind the door in silence, just listening. And that's when he said it, almost in a confessional tone. "Mom, it's about a lawyer. It's about the house." That put me on alert. Lawyer. House. What was this about? I took a deep breath, put my hand on the latch, but left it closed. I spoke loud enough for them to hear. "A lawyer? Why, Michael? Now it's like this? It's not enough to call me a useless old woman. Now you have to bring a lawyer to sort things out?" There was a heavy silence. I felt it from the other side of the door. Then the man in the suit spoke with a calm, measured voice. "Mrs. Morrison, good evening. My name is Mr. Carlson. I'm the family attorney for your son. We're not here to disrespect you. It's just that Michael asked me to help with a documentation matter. No fight." I laughed to myself. Documentation always starts that way. But even so, something made me turn the key and open just a crack, enough to look them in the eyes, and that's exactly what I did. Michael had his head a little low, without that haughty look he usually had. Jennifer avoided looking at me, and Mr. Carlson, holding that black briefcase, seemed to be the only one there with any kind of control over the situation. I looked straight at my son and asked in the driest way possible, "So, are you going to explain, or are you just going to stand there looking like you don't know where you're standing?" He took a deep breath, ran his hand over the back of his neck, and spoke. "Mom, look, there's a problem with the county office. The deed to the house. I didn't know you'd left everything still in your name." In that moment, I felt my heart heat up, but I kept my calm, because I'd always known. I never transferred the house into anyone's name. The house was mine, my sweat, my work, my story. But look at this. Only now, after years, after being called a useless old woman, did it matter to them. You understand, Mom? I thought it was already taken care of, but when I checked, it needs your signature to transfer. Without it, I can't. He said it while swallowing his words, because he knew it wasn't just bureaucracy, it was about respect. And standing in front of me wasn't just my son anymore. It was someone who depended on me. And as much as it hurt to remember everything he'd said before, as much as I wanted to send him away, I just stood there, looking at him and remembering when he was little and asked me to help put together his Christmas toys. The lawyer cleared his throat and opened the briefcase, showing some papers through the crack in the door. "It's simple, Mrs. Morrison. You sign here and there, acknowledge it at the county office, and then everything will be properly in your son's name." I stayed silent for a while, long enough to see Michael start to fidget nervously. He'd always been like that when he didn't have control of the situation. But I wasn't in a hurry. I took a deep breath and spoke very slowly. "Tomorrow you come back. Not today. I need to think. This isn't just walls and a roof. It's my history." And before he could try to insist, I closed the door again, slowly, without slamming it. That night I stayed up again. I grabbed the keys, put them on the kitchen table, and stared at them like they were some kind of answer. Because deep down, I already knew it wasn't just paperwork. It was about pride, about who had control. And in the early morning, sitting there, I had a conversation with myself. I spoke out loud to Robert, as if he were still by my side. "Love, look where we ended up. He wants to take from me even the last thing I built." And it was looking at his photograph there on the living room cabinet that I decided, the next day, I was going to give my answer. But it wouldn't be the way he expected. Early in the morning, when the sun had barely risen, I put on my best clothes, white button-up blouse, dark slacks, polished shoes. I grabbed the old folder where I kept my documents and left. I went to the county office alone, not to sign what they wanted, but to make sure nothing would be signed without my consent. And it was there, sitting across from the young woman at the county office, that I heard the phrase that changed everything. "Mrs. Morrison, according to the records, this house remains entirely in your name, and if you'd like, you can even file a preventive block so nobody can touch it without a court order." I sat there for a few seconds in silence. And then, looking her right in the eyes, I answered, "Then let's do that now." I walked out of there with peace in my heart, and that same day, Michael would come back. But this time, I wouldn't be the one opening the door first. That afternoon, I was prepared. The folder with the county block on the kitchen table, the official document saying in big letters that nobody could transfer, sell, or touch that house without my express signature. And listen, it felt strange holding that. It was like holding my own history in paper form. I didn't feel anger, but I also didn't feel that weight of guilt every parent carries anymore, thinking they need to bend over backwards for their children all the time. It was a different kind of peace, the silence of someone who'd already resolved things on the inside. It didn't take long. Around 4 in the afternoon, the same car stopped in front of the house again. But this time, I didn't jump up to peek through the window. I just sat there facing the document, waiting for the sound at the gate. Michael and Jennifer got out of the car without the lawyer. This time they came straight up, faster than last time. Michael clapped his hands loud, then came that call. "Mom, we need to talk." I got up, went to the door. This time I unlocked it without delay and opened it all the way, letting him look me in the eyes. I didn't say anything, just stood there holding the door halfway, waiting for him to say what he wanted. And it was Jennifer who spoke first. Her voice was shaky, different from usual. "Mrs. Morrison, we didn't want it to be like this. We didn't mean to hurt you." But Michael interrupted in his usual way. "Mom, if you don't sign, we can't transfer the house into our name. I needed this to get a loan, to organize some things." I held back a laugh, not because it was funny, but because now it made sense. It wasn't just about documents, it was money, it was convenience. And me, like a fool, leaving the doors open all these years. I took a step outside the house, looked at him real firm, and spoke slowly. "Michael, do you remember when you were little and you were scared to sleep alone in your room? Who stayed up all night with you, sitting by your bed?" He fell silent, looked down. I continued. "And remember when you broke your leg playing ball? Who carried you in their arms to the hospital? Who sold the only good watch they had to pay for the cast?" Jennifer's eyes were already filling with tears. Michael couldn't even look at me right. But I wasn't there to make a scene. I was just saying what needed to be said. I went to the kitchen table, grabbed the folder with the document, and came back to the door. Opened it wide so he could see. I showed him the stamp, the signatures, everything nice and proper. And I said, "This here says that nobody puts their hands on this house without my authorization. And you know what? I'm not going to authorize anything. Because after hearing from your mouth that I'm a useless old woman, I understood that it's not a parent's job to leave their own dignity in their children's hands." He stood there frozen. Jennifer pulled him by the arm, whispering something, but I didn't want to hear it. I just put the folder under my arm, adjusted my shirt, and finished. "You might not need me for anything anymore, Michael, but this house is my history, and there's no lawyer, no county office, no bank that's going to change that." I closed the door slowly. Didn't slam it, just closed it. And I stood there leaning against it from the inside, listening to his footsteps walking away. That night, I sat on the porch again, looking at the dark sky. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd finally done the right thing. And there, in the silence of the night, someone very special appeared. The person who showed up that night wasn't Michael. It wasn't Jennifer. It wasn't the grandkids. It was someone I hadn't expected anymore. My daughter, Sarah. She lived in another state, a good number of miles away, always busy with her nursing job. Since Robert passed, we'd talked much less, but always with respect. But that night, around 8:30, when I'd already finished my coffee, I heard a different car pull up in front of the house. The headlights lit up the side of the porch. I got up slowly, thinking it might just be someone lost. But when the car door opened and I saw that hurried way of getting out, the purse hanging from her shoulder, I recognized her right away. "Sarah," I whispered to myself before reaching the gate. She didn't wait for me to open it. She hopped over the small side gate like she used to do as a kid and came to hug me tight. I smelled her perfume mixed with the smell of the road. I stayed quiet for a moment, just squeezing that hug. Because there are hugs you need more than bread at breakfast. "Mom," I found out. "Michael called me. He said you locked everything up, that you don't want to see anyone anymore." I let go slowly, looked her in the eyes, and spoke calmly. "It's not quite like that, honey. I just decided to put things in their place. The house is mine, always has been. But they forgot that." Sarah came inside with me, took off her shoes at the door like she always did, and we sat there in the kitchen. I served hot coffee for both of us, and we talked quietly. She asked me everything. She wanted to know how it had been since the Sunday dinner, until the block at the county office, and while I told her, she listened in silence, eyes welling up, holding my hand every now and then. When I finished explaining, she said something that stuck in my head. "Mom, you shouldn't have gone through this alone. If I'd known sooner, I would have come. Michael's always been a little hard-headed, but you're the pillar of this family." That gave me a lump in my throat. Because deep down, that's all I wanted to hear. I didn't need the house or the deed or the official document. I just needed to hear that I still mattered to someone. We stayed there until late, reminiscing about old things. We talked about Robert, about the holiday parties, about the Christmases when the house was full of the smell of roasted ham and apple pie. And for the first time in many years, that house felt alive again. Not because of a party, not because of noise, but because of true presence. Before leaving, almost midnight, Sarah hugged me again and said, "Mom, anything at all, you call me. I'll come. Doesn't matter what time." And when she left, I was alone again, but with a lighter heart. I knew I still had a daughter who remembered me without any interest, without wanting anything in return. But the next morning, the phone would ring again. And this time, it would be Michael himself. But the tone wouldn't be the same. The next morning, the kitchen landline rang, that old metallic sound that seems to already carry the weight of age with it. I was out there sweeping the yard, listening to the birds singing, when I heard it. I walked slowly to the phone, dried my hand on the dish towel, and answered. "Hello?" On the other end, his voice. "Mom, it's me, Michael." But this time it didn't come harsh or rushed or with that tone of someone giving orders. It came low, almost tired, like someone who'd spent the night thinking. "I need to talk to you. I've been thinking about everything." He started slowly, kind of choking on his words. I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. "I was wrong, Mom. I said things I shouldn't have. That thing at dinner about the useless old woman. I don't even know why I said it." It took me a moment to respond. Because words like that, you listen to them carefully. But deep down, even though it hurt, I'd already prepared myself to hear that someday. "Michael, words don't come back, but we choose what we do with them." He took a deep breath on the other end of the line. "I don't want the house anymore, Mom. I don't need it. I just wanted to really apologize." And that was the part that got me, because it wasn't an apology because of money or because of the deed. It was an apology from someone who recognized they were wrong. And me, who always thought I was too strong to cry over something like this, felt my eyes get damp there in the kitchen, holding the phone against my ear. "All right, Michael, but an apology doesn't change everything all at once. We need respect, real respect, not just when it's convenient," he agreed quietly. "I know, Mom, I know." We stayed there for a few seconds in silence, just the sound of the line, that background hum, like it was the echo of all the conversations we never had properly. Until he spoke again. "Can I come by later, just to see you? No papers, no lawyer, just to have some coffee." I looked out the window. Clear blue sky, the rocking chair waiting for me on the porch, and I thought to myself, maybe it was time to open the door again, but in a different way this time. Not because someone expected it of me, but because I wanted to. "You can come, Michael. The door will be open. But come with respect, and come with your heart at peace." He gave a muffled laugh, kind of awkward. "All right, Mom. See you later then." I hung up slowly, put the phone back on the hook, and stood there for a while, thinking about everything, from that first Sunday dinner until now. And that's when I realized the biggest lock I'd changed wasn't on the house. It was on my own heart. And that afternoon, Michael would come. But before he arrived, I needed to do one last thing, something I hadn't done in many years, something that maybe was the key to closing this story the right way. Even before Michael arrived that Sunday afternoon, I'd sat alone in the kitchen and stayed there for a while, just staring at nothing, breathing slowly. I knew he was coming because he'd said so on the phone. But more than that, I felt it. I felt that this time it wasn't just talk. But even so, inside me there was a mix of feelings that was hard to explain. One part wanted to open the door for good. Another part never wanted to open it again. And it's in those moments you realize the hardest thing in life isn't forgiving others. It's forgiving yourself for letting it get to this point. That's when I decided to make a simple gesture, but one that meant a lot to me. I went to the back room, opened that old varnished wooden wardrobe that was always locked. And in there, way in the back, was a special jar of coffee I'd been saving for years. It wasn't store-bought coffee. It was the kind I used to roast myself, beans ground fresh, something I learned from my father. Robert always said that coffee should only be served on important occasions. I grabbed the jar, cleaned the dust off carefully, like I was running my hand over a memory, and went to the kitchen to prepare everything in silence. Each movement done slowly, like a ritual. While the coffee brewed, I stood at the window, looking at the empty street. The wind blew the leaves on the magnolia tree out front, and the sun hit in a way that cast shadows inside the kitchen. I thought about how many years had passed since the first time Michael came running through that door. Small, barefoot, with scraped knees asking to be held, and now? Now he was a grown man, head down, wanting to make things right another way. But did he really understand what was at stake here? It wasn't just the house, or the gate, or the deed. It was memory. It was history. It was the respect of a mother who'd given everything she had. When it struck 3 o'clock on the wall clock, I heard the car pull up. I didn't get up in a hurry. I made a point of keeping the same calm pace. Michael got out of the car alone. No wife, no papers, no lawyer. He wore a simple dress shirt, light blue, sleeves rolled up on his forearms like someone coming from a long day of work. And on his face, there wasn't that arrogant expression from other days. It was something else. He looked like a big kid coming back to apologize to his mom. I opened the gate without saying a word, but I looked him straight in the eyes. I made a point of that, to show him that even without needing to speak, he understood that his entrance at that moment was different. He took off his shoes at the door, like he always did as a child, and came in. He sat in the wooden kitchen chair and just stared at the table while I finished brewing the coffee. I took my time on purpose, and when I sat across from him, I placed the cup on the table, and only then did I speak. "So, Michael, now tell me in your own words why you're here." He took a deep breath, slowly stirring the coffee with the spoon. And when he lifted his eyes to me, there wasn't even half of that pride from before. "Mom, I was an idiot, ungrateful. I thought that because life was busy, because I had bills to pay, because I had a loan, I could just run over things. I said what I shouldn't have. I said it in a way no son should talk to his mother." I stayed quiet, letting him say it. I didn't interrupt, didn't make an angry face or a pitying one, just looked at him. Michael continued, "You've always been more of a man than me. I just didn't see it. I kept trying to solve things like you were just another obstacle, and I forgot that without you, I wouldn't even be here." Those words echoed inside me more than any document. I never expected to hear that out loud from him one day. I always expected actions, but sometimes we forget that words heal too. He pulled something small from his pocket and placed it on the table, an old, worn leather keychain with an engraved letter you could barely read. I recognized it right away. That keychain I'd given him when he got his first driver's license. I remember saying, "This key here is a symbol of responsibility, Michael." And he, all teenage boy, had promised to take good care of it. Now, he was giving it back. I kept it all this time, Mom, but I forgot what it meant. I picked up the keychain, ran my fingers over it, and answered without rushing, "Now you remembered." And that's how it is, son. It's not shameful to forget. The shame is never wanting to remember again. The conversation stretched on. one of those that doesn't have a proper beginning or end, but that slowly washes the soul. We talked about Robert, about old Christmases, about the parties we used to have, about his first day of school, his first bicycle. I saw on his face that all of that was still alive, hidden under so much rushing around, so much worry about money, bills, adult life. When Michael was almost standing up to leave, I spoke one more time. Son, you know we close doors, but a parent's heart, even when it locks, never throws away the key. He smiled a little, adjusted his shirt, and answered, "Thank you, Mom, for leaving the key there, waiting for me to remember." I walked him to the gate, and different from other days, this time I stood there watching him get in the car, no rush to close the gate. I stood there watching until he disappeared around the curve in the street with my heart lighter. But even so, deep down, I knew. There was still something missing. One last detail that needed to be resolved. One gesture from me. Not for him, but for myself. And that's what I would do the next day, at dawn, with the first sun hitting the yard. Because some things only we can decide how to finish. The next morning, before the sky was completely light, I was already up. The house in silence, just the soft sound of the wind moving the leaves of the orange tree in the yard. I went to the kitchen, made my strong black coffee like always, and sat at the wooden table, looking at the set of keys on the cloth. It wasn't just any set of keys. It was the one I'd organized when I changed all the locks in the house. Front door, back door, garage, side gate. Each key represented in that moment a decision I'd made. And now it was time to truly decide what to do with them. It wasn't because Michael had come to apologize that everything erased itself overnight. I'd learned that the hard way. Forgiveness is one thing, trust is another. And to trust again, the heart needs time. But even so, something inside me said I couldn't stay trapped in that forever. That this house couldn't just be a symbol of hurt. It had been built to be a home, not a fortress. I grabbed the set of keys, put them in my shirt pocket, and walked slowly to the gate. I didn't open it right away. I stood there for a few minutes leaning against the bars, breathing deep. I looked at the empty street, at the houses around, at the sidewalk where my grandkids used to play when they came here, and it was looking at that stretch of street that memory brought me another image. Little Michael, sitting on the ground with a toy car, waiting for me to come home from work. Back then, I was his hero, the strong mom who knew how to fix everything. It was with that in my head that I decided, that day I was going to his house. Not to fight, not to demand anything, but to bring him a key, just one. Not the whole set, just the key to the front door. A simple, old key. But with a clear meaning. The door is open, but you need to know how to knock. I changed clothes, cotton shirt, dress slacks, splashed some water on my face to take away the tiredness from my eyes. I grabbed the old car, the same one that had been with me for over 20 years, and drove slowly through the city streets. Radio off, just the engine humming quietly and my head full of thoughts, but without anguish. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going because I wanted to end this the right way. Arriving there, I parked the car in front of his house. It was a big house, well kept, with a covered garage, trimmed lawn. Nothing like the simplicity of mine. But inside, I knew. Sometimes what's missing can't be bought. I got out of the car slowly, walked to the gate, and pressed the doorbell. I didn't have to wait long. Michael himself came to open it. When he saw me there, he stood still, surprised. He wasn't expecting it. I noticed that in the way he stood there holding the doorknob, not knowing whether to open it or not. "Mom." That's all he said. I slowly raised my hand and showed him the key, without words. I held it out to him, looking him in the eyes. And it was there, in that exchange of looks, that he understood. I didn't need to say it was the key to the house. He knew. He knew I wasn't giving back the right to come in whenever he wanted, but that if he ever wanted to come with respect, with calm, The door wasn't completely closed. He took the key with both hands slowly, like someone receiving something precious. And for the first time, I saw on his face something I hadn't seen in a long time. Sincere gratitude, with no ulterior motive behind it. We stood there for a few more minutes exchanging few words. No speeches, no long hug. Sometimes it's in silence that we resolve things. I said goodbye, went back to the car and left slowly, feeling inside my chest a mixture of longing and relief. When I got home, I sat on the porch again with my coffee cup in hand, looking at the yard. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel that weight in my heart. But it's funny. Right that evening, when the sun was already starting to go down behind the hills, the doorbell rang at my house. And this time, it wasn't Michael. It was someone I hadn't seen in much longer. Someone I never imagined would show up at that door again. When I heard the doorbell ring that afternoon, my first thought was, must be Michael again. After everything that happened, after the conversation about the key, it seemed natural he'd come try another approach, or maybe bring the grandkids to show he really wanted to start over. But something about the sound, the paused, unhurried way of the doorbell, made me realize it wasn't him. I can't explain it, but these are things you only learn with time, with a lifetime of observation watching the house and who passes by it. I walked slowly to the door, holding the set of keys in my hand out of habit, even though I didn't need to. When I opened it, the scene made me stop for a moment, not quite knowing what to do. There, standing, holding a small travel bag in her hands, hair much grayer than the last time I saw her, was my older sister Norma. More than 15 years had passed since Robert's funeral, when we had our last conversation, or rather, our last fight. It was a silly argument, but as happens between siblings who grow old without saying the right things at the right time, it turned into distance. One sharp word about inheritance, another badly answered, and each of us went our separate ways. I honestly didn't think she'd show up again, not even if I got really sick. But there she was, standing in front of me, with her usual expression, calm, but with a heavy look that can't be disguised even with a smile. "Ruth," was all she said. And I stood there looking at her, feeling time pass through both of us at once. I could very well have closed the door, said it was too late, but our hearts don't work that way. As much as our heads say one thing, it's always the chest that decides in the end. I made a gesture with my hand, opening space at the door, and said simply, "Come in, Norma. The house is the same. The door's still open." She came in slowly, observing the environment, like someone who doesn't want to invade too much, like someone who knows the space isn't quite theirs anymore. She sat in the wooden kitchen chair, adjusted the bag on her lap, and stayed there quiet, without saying a word for a few minutes. I served the coffee, already half cold, just out of respect for custom. I placed the cup in front of her and sat in my chair across from her. That's when she spoke, looking around, slowly stirring the coffee with the spoon without lifting her eyes much. "It's been a while, huh?" I nodded without smiling. "Too long," I answered in a low voice, the way you talk when you don't want to seem angry or too sentimental. And then she took a deep breath, adjusted her hands on the bag, and said in a direct way, no beating around the bush, "I heard about Michael. Heard what happened with the house, with the locks, with everything. Not from Michael, of course, but things get around, even in a small town." I kept looking at her without answering, stirring my coffee unhurried. And then she said, "And I thought, if even you, Ruth, are going through this with your kids, who am I to keep carrying grudges like this?" That phrase got me, because it was true. How many years do we waste in life carrying things that don't even make sense anymore? Sometimes we remember the pain, but forget the reason. We stay stuck in the past out of pure stubbornness. She continued, "I came here because I wanted to apologize for everything, for the inheritance, for the harsh words. We're too old for these things." I looked at her calmly, letting the spoon rest on the saucer, and spoke in the simplest, truest way I could find. Norma, it's really past. There's no more room in here to hold on to resentment. And when I said that, I realized it was really true. I'd already forgiven Michael in a way. I'd already made peace with myself. Her visit seemed like just the last piece of a puzzle that had been open for years, waiting to be finished. Norma stayed for dinner. It wasn't anything special. Simple rice, a piece of grilled steak, tomato salad, just like the old days when the house was full, but the food was always simple and made with care. We talked until after 9 at night, remembering childhood stories about Dad, about Mom, about when we were little and thought the world was just that piece of yard at our parents' house. When it was time to leave, already outside at the gate, she hugged me tight. In that way only a sibling hugs, and said, "Take care of yourself, Ruth. Don't disappear again." And I, with a half smile, without exaggeration, answered as sincerely as I could, "I won't disappear any more, Norma. Now it's just open door." I closed the gate slowly, without locking it with the key. I sat back in the rocking chair on the porch and stayed there looking at the dark sky, thinking about time, about the turns life takes. For the first time in many years, there was no more weight inside my chest, not with my son, not with my sister, not with myself. Everything was in its place. But even so, deep down, I knew there was just one more thing missing, one last detail, one last visit. A key that wasn't for Michael or for Norma. It was a key for someone who wasn't here anymore, and that was what I needed to resolve in my own way. One last tribute, one last conversation, and nobody else needed to hear it. It was between me, my heart, and the person who stayed forever in my silence. The next morning, I woke up before the first rays of sun touched the kitchen walls. The clock in the living room showed 5:10, and the sky was still that grayish way, kind of bluish, with that silence that only exists at dawn. I got up without hurrying, put on my white shirt, dark pants, and grabbed from the wooden wardrobe that same set of keys, but this time separating just one, the oldest of them all. It was small, made of iron, worn at the ends, and didn't even open any door in the house anymore. But that wasn't why I was holding it. That key was from my father's old toolbox, something I kept more for memory than necessity. And it was this key I'd take with me that day. I put it in my shirt pocket and left, head held high, walking slowly, feeling the cool wind hit my face. I went on foot. It wasn't far. I walked the same sidewalks I'd walked so many times, but now with a different step, without hurry, without anything to prove to anyone. When I arrived, I stopped in front of the low gate. I'd painted it light blue years ago, and I saw it was still the same way, a little worn but firm. I opened it carefully and went in. It was the town cemetery, simple, small, not much different since the last time I'd been there. I walked between the rows of graves, breathing deep, until I reached the corner where Robert's headstone was. The white stone, with his name engraved in letters that were already starting to fade with time, but you could still read it clearly. I stopped in front, took off my cap out of respect, and stood there in silence for a while. It was only after a good few minutes that I took the key from my pocket and placed it on top of the headstone, right in the center. It wasn't for anyone else to see. It was for him, a way of saying, "Here it is, love." I closed all the doors I needed to close. Now everything's right. I stayed there talking quietly, as if he were there by my side. You saw, didn't you? Michael, Norma, even me. Everyone took their time, but they understood. The house is still standing, but now nobody comes in without learning to knock first. And me, I learned, too. I learned that we need to know when to lock the door and when to open it again. The wind blew strong right when I said that, like it was an answer. I stayed a while longer, just listening to the sound of leaves rustling, feeling his presence in a way you can't explain to anyone. And when the sun appeared from behind the trees, I said goodbye in a low voice, adjusted the cap back on my head, and left walking the same way back home. Arriving home, I sat on the porch in the rocking chair, looking at the open gate. This time I didn't bother getting up to close it. I just stayed there feeling the smell of coffee coming from the kitchen, listening to the sound of the birds, thinking about everything that had happened. Michael, Norma, the keys, the silence. Everything was part of the same story. A story that started with pain, with harsh words, with locked doors, but that now was at peace. 6 months have passed since that day. Michael comes by every other Sunday, always calls first, always knocks. The grandkids play in the yard again, but now they know Grandma's house has rules, and respect is the first one. Sarah visits once a month, stays the weekend, helps me with the garden. We talk about Robert, about old times, about the future. And for the first time in years, the future doesn't scare me. Norma and I talk on the phone every week. She's even planning to move back to town next year. Says she wants to spend her last years close to family. And you know what? I think that's just fine. The house is still in my name. And it will stay that way as long as I'm alive. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because I learned something important. Your worth isn't measured by what you give away. It's measured by what you know you deserve. That old set of keys? I keep them in a drawer in the kitchen. Sometimes I take them out, look at them, and remember everything. But I don't need them anymore. The real lock I opened wasn't on any door. And if you've made it this far, I want to thank you for listening to me. Really. Because sometimes we think our stories don't matter, that nobody wants to hear about an old woman's problems. But you stayed. You listened, and that means more to me than you know. Have you ever been made to feel small by someone who should have lifted you up? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when it felt like the whole world was against you? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And who knows, maybe your story will help someone else find the courage to change their own locks. If this story touched your heart, please share it, like it. Subscribe to Heartland Confessions, because every day there's a new story here. Real people, real struggles, real hope. And remember, you're never too old to stand up for yourself. You're never too old to demand respect. And you're never, ever too old to change the locks. Thank you for being here with me today. God bless you all.